Okay, you're on. You want me to move your cursor a bit on that?
Right, I just keep coming back to it, so should be okay.
I've got it here. Sorry, I'll get it.
We'll try and start again, guys. I think it's important that we try and finish off what we were talking about this morning, the road from Barcelona to Delhi, because I think there was some interesting stuff in there. I've given Mick 15 minutes to do that, so it'll probably take me 20 to get stopped, okay? Maybe take about 5 minutes of questions at that point, and then we'll go into the club bit, and again we'll try and rattle that off in about 35 to 40 minutes, okay? Looking at key aspects of what makes Aldershot, okay? So Mick, over to you.
Okay, so I'm sorry that it was a bit rushed before and everything, but I think there's a lot of stuff here that is relevant that we should try and just cover if we can. Can we see that, or is it too small? Right, okay. Right, okay, so how's that?
No, that's a Louis.
That's okay? Yep.
No.
No? Bigger?
Sorry, I've got more in my ear.
Okay. Right, so what happened after she came back from Barcelona was obviously there was going to be a bit of a down period, and that was something that we always expected would happen. But because of the Commonwealth Games being something that was still in the in the plans, or possibly in the plans, Steph also, because she had that form, she had some other races that she really wanted to run. And the targets that we were looking at was to run Zurich in the Diamond League, and to go to Brussels and, I'll be honest, to break the Scottish record, because at 5,000 metres that's what she felt she could do. And the training that we were going to put in place was something that would convince us that she was capable of doing that. So she came back from Barcelona, and in hindsight I would have changed things, but I didn't at the time, so this is what actually happened, okay? So my coaching has always been a learning curve, and unfortunately along the way Steph has probably been a big part of that learning curve. As I alluded to earlier, when we went in Berlin the year before, we had some issues and some problems, and that went wrong, and that was partly to do with what went on in Monte Gordo in 2009 pre-Berlin. So in 2010 in Monte Gordo, we felt we got it dead right, because it enabled her to go to Barcelona and produce that performance, and we modified that. But then, you know, like any coach, well, I'm assuming like any coach, when you see something is going well, you tend to want to continue to explore that and tend to want to keep pushing it forward. So she came back from Barcelona, and you know, even after coming back, she did a 40-minute easy run in the afternoon, and then in the morning on the Tuesday she did a 30-minute run, followed by a session up at Battersea Park, which she did on her own. I wasn't there to do it, she was staying at her brother's, but it was at a pace which wasn't necessarily going to be high-end pace. It was something that was going to be, you know, reasonable pace and a sensible type session. But already we were trying to put back in a little bit endurance, because we needed to move back that way, having concentrated a lot more on the aerobic side. So she did some Ks with a view that we were going to be looking towards the 5,000 later on in the month. Well, actually, yes, it will be August. So she ran 3 by a K off a 90 seconds recovery, 5 4s, 5 2s, 6 by 100 metre easy lactic strides, and then a warm down. And I'm quite happy to give this presentation to Mike, and for Mike to circulate it. So if people can't get all this down, don't feel that they need to try to get it down. So she did the K at 3-minute pace. So we were looking at 15-minute 5K pace, and that was just at 5K pace. We knew that she could run 15 minutes for sure, and then she ran the 400s at 67.68, and ran the 2s to keep in touch with it, the pace at 30.31. Really happy with my session, still buzzing from the champs. And she had this document before she went, but what we do is we fill it in as we go with her comments and everything else that go with it. So and this is where we probably were starting to overcook, but unfortunately that's the way we went. She then ran a couple of steady runs on the Wednesday, travelled to Stockholm on the Thursday, did a 20-minute run at the hotel on arrival, and she was preparing to run the Stockholm Diamond League the next day, and did a usual 15-minute run with some strides in the morning on the day of the race, and then ran the Diamond League in Stockholm, finished 9th and ran 4:04.25, which was a good time given the circumstances, but obviously wasn't what she did in Barcelona, but it was still a good performance. 4:04. She's now become far more consistent at running 4:04 as against last year when she was running more like 4:05, 4:06. Now she's running 4:04s, 4:03s, 4:02s consistently. And that's what, you know, if you look at the Para 10, you'd see that that's how her performances have really come on. So this is now August the 8th, well, August the 7th on the Saturday, 45-minute steady run in Stockholm, 30-minute easy run from home when she got back, from my house in fact, because she wanted to come and tell me all about it. She had a bit of a stiff ankle, possibly accounts for the volume of everything that had been going on. And again, on the Sunday, we did one of my big volume sessions, which were designed to start putting that aerobic stuff back in there, which in my view we always have to come back and touch, because she'd been doing loads and loads of high-end stuff. She needed to come back and do some lower, more volume type work, put that back in the bank for what was to come. And we may have had a different approach if we hadn't been looking at the Commonwealth Games. So she did the grass session, and you can see it's a fairly big session, 7.5 minute tempo of 3 minutes recovery. Then she did a 200 minute recovery, 300 minute recovery, 400 minute recovery, 500, 90 seconds pyramid, up and back down. Now, that is not always the type of session we do on a Sunday, but in the summer, you know, I find that this time of the year it's still quite a good higher end aerobic type session, but with still getting the right kind of lactate response for short recoveries that we're looking to do, because, you know, recoveries are still relatively short. Yes.
Remind us what time scale you're working towards daily.
What time?
When was daily?
This was August the 8th.
Daily's when?
Delhi was October. What's the question?
When was daily?
Delhi, October. When was it?
Good question. I was there.
Yeah.
Around
So
the 10th, I think it was. So it's
we
about
were still looking at what
9
was going to
weeks,
happen.
9 weeks.
So on the Monday she did a 50-minute run, and then on the Tuesday she did a 30-minute easy run, and then she did a road and grass session. So we were looking to try and put more volume in again, so she did 2x2k on the road off the 4-minute recovery. Then she went on the grass, did 6x500, 5x200. So she got 2k, 4k, 7k, 8k's worth of work there with a mixture of surface. Again, looking towards the 5k, wanted to get the 2k effort on the road. Measured road loop, she was running close on 6 minutes on a measured road loop. In fact, she might have run one of them under 6, I think, if I remember rightly. PB road times, oh sorry, look at that, 5:47 and 5:52, feeling in total control. So this is a pretty accurate measured 2k loop. So we see she's actually flying. And bear in mind that when we did that session in the spring, because we normally do road reps in September, and again we'll normally do them around March for the road relay type season. And, you know, that's the sort of loop that the guys like Johnny Hayne was running similar sort of times on that loop. Johnny, you know, wasn't running much quicker than that for his, and this is the kid who's run sub 14 minutes for 5k. So she was in great shape, there's no doubt about it. But I'm still pushing, obviously. Then still into a steady running on the Wednesday, 30 minutes and 40 minutes. Another steady run on the Tuesday, on the Thursday, but then we have Crystal Palace on the Friday, where she's running the 1500, and everyone will go, what the hell was she doing that session for? We weren't worried about Crystal Palace, it didn't really matter. I knew what was going to happen at Crystal Palace. There was going to be no pacemaker, the race was going to be a pile of rubbish, and as far as I was concerned, she was just contracted to do it as a GB athlete, and there was no way that she was going to go and run fast. Unfortunately, she had a bit of a sugar rush, and pace went off really, really slow, and Steph went from last to first within the space of about the first 300 metres, and led the race, and then proceeded to go backwards. And as you can see, she finished 13th and ran 4:14.39. As we thought, no pacemakers. This is her comments, not mine. Really slow race. I had no change of pace. My legs felt flat today. I didn't execute the best race plan in relation to how I was feeling. Shouldn't have run front run the race. Rush of blood to the head after the first 100 metres. Her words, not mine. That's what she felt. Now, you know, I would not have had her running that race. There's no way I would have done it, because the important bit to me was what was happening earlier in the week. And I knew that everyone would go, oh, what was that about? But when you do 3 10k volume sessions between, well, 2 to 3 10k volume sessions between coming back from Barcelona and then going and running this, then you're not going to run well. But bear in mind, this is still not far away from her attempt to run the 5,000 metres. So I haven't got any more on that at the moment, but what I'll do is I want to refer to the power of 10 from the point of view that you can see from this what actually happened in that period, because okay, so in fact she ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 1500s that year. 2 that are missing are the ones in Delhi. So, but if you look, obviously she ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 quicker than 4:07. So she ran 7 quicker than 4:7. Now, you can see that the pattern was that the race at Crystal Palace, where she ran the 4:14, was almost the slowest one of the year, apart from the ridiculously slow 4:34.55 at Birmingham, which I noticed that you had on your little presentation, and I couldn't see Steph in the race. She was so far back, it was unbelievable. But that was obviously pre-Barcelona anyway, but the race was ridiculously slow. But what actually happened there was that we knew that she'd fallen in the heap, and given that Stockholm was a good performance on the 6th of August, and she then ran the race at Crystal Palace on the 13th of August, and because of the volume of training, we continued to load that volume of training after Crystal Palace, similar sort of volume of work. We didn't go into any speed training at all. We just did all endurance work, along the same lines as what I've shown there. And she went to Zurich on the 19th of August, which was literally 6 days after the 4:14 in Crystal Palace, and ran 4:2.54, which was a PB, finished 3rd in the race. Now, we knew that she was in shape to do that. We knew that she could run it, because there was no doubt in my mind. But that wasn't the only goal, because the bigger goal was obviously to come in the 5,000. But in that race she finished third. It was the race where they all fell over, but Steph was still running by far and away her best race of the year, because before they fell over, Steph was actually in a position where she could finish third. And for the first time this year, we were actually seeing Steph really starting to convert the power that she built in the gym onto the track, and converting that to finishing speed. And that's something that Steph, everyone would say Steph's a plodder, she's a donkey, she's slow, but it's rubbish, because Steph actually has been developing that over a period of time. And in that particular race, she finished as strong as Langat, who won it, and Burka, who finished second, and in fact was closing Burka down at the end. And Steph was actually impeded by all that went on in that race as well. And that race really and truthfully should have provided Steph with a sub 4 minute clocking, because she was capable of doing it. And if it hadn't been for the pacemaker in that race, who should have dropped out, carrying on to 200 metres to go and impeding everybody in the race, then I think the whole field would have probably gone very, very close to breaking 4 minutes. And it was just unfortunate that the pacemaker had this idea that because she was so far in front, she could hang in there and possibly still win the race. It was Belita, and she should have dropped out, which was really a bit of a pity, because it did mess the race up for a lot of people. But Steph still achieved and salvaged a great result out of it. But I think it's significant, despite all that hard work, we still went and achieved that performance. She then went to Brussels on the 27th of August. There was a bit of time, obviously, between Zurich. There was 8 days. But in between that, what we actually did was, we went on the track again, and we did a couple of specific sessions. For example, 2K on the track at around 6:10 pace, a lap jog, and then 4 by a K in 3 minutes, 2:56, 2:55, and 2:53, all off a 90 seconds recovery. Well, having run that, that doesn't say that an athlete has then got the capabilities of going out there and running a fast 5,000, then, you know, I'd be very, very surprised. And I knew that at that moment Steph was in shape to break that Scottish record. And in fact, she went into the race in Brussels, and as you can see, the 5,000 down the bottom there on the 27th of August, she ran 14:54.08 and finished only 11th in the race. But the only non-African to beat her was Molly Huddle, who actually broke the American record in that race. With 3 laps to go, Steph was with her, in front of her. Unfortunately, because of female issues, Steph suffered severe cramps over the last 3 laps of that race, and would have definitely broken 14:50 if it hadn't been for that. Because she told me on the morning of the race, and I said to her, "Oh God, what are you going to do?" She said, "I'm just going to go and run hard." And she ran with that confidence and belief. And I know now that if, you know, everything had been right on that day, then she would have actually gone and broken 14:50. She didn't finish the season there, because we wanted to get a 5K out. Sorry, the 5K road race, which she ran at the Adidas 5K race in London, where she went and ran 15:32, finished third in the race behind Maasai and Quebec, and then we finished it off on the 8th of September with an 8:42 3,000 metre race at Watford, where she finished second in the race, I think. Yeah, she was third in the race. Only 2 guys beat her, and with the bell, she was right there in it to win it, and ran 8:42.75. Now, at that point, I wanted to bag the season, and that would have been it gone. But there was a person sitting over there.
I didn't talk to him again.
Yeah, and you know, as far as I was concerned, that should have been it. Should have been the end of it. Steph was physically and mentally exhausted, as you can imagine. But with a season like that, you know, pushing to achieve those kind of results, you know, yeah, we're going to get that. And really and truthfully, in my view, she should never have gone to the Commonwealth Games. But we had the conversation, and she said that, yeah, I want to go. I said to her, "You're only going to go if you're going to win a medal." I said, "You're not going to not win a medal." And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, there's just no point." I said, "You want to go and run this race. It's an opportunity if you are going to go there, and you should be going there with that focus and that intention." But what she wanted to do was, obviously, she wanted to shut down for a period. And if you look at it, there was a very, very short window for her to do that. From the 8th of September, with the Commonwealth Games a month away, it was going to be difficult to be able to do that. So she actually shut down for a week, went on to a pop festival and spent a whole weekend at a pop festival, and God knows what she got up to because I wasn't there, but she told me she enjoyed herself. She did go with her sister, so I'm assuming that she was under control, and her sister's a good bit older than her. But I don't think the pop festival is an ideal preparation for going and running the Commonwealth Games, but I'm not going to say to her, no, you can't do it, you know, she's got to get on with it, that's what she wants to do. But straight afterwards, when she came back to running, she was it was very difficult to start to motivate her and to get her to where we needed to be. And this was really, you know, starting to cause, you know, me real concerns and worries, because I could see that this was not necessarily going to be a good result coming out of the Commonwealth Games. And to be honest, Mike will tell you, I was still on for pulling out and not pushing this forward. But
we were talking 2 or 3 times a week on the board.
And as far as I was concerned, you know, this was going to be a hard one. So she came back in, did some steady running, didn't do any sessions, had a week and a half of that, but I had to put something into her before she went to the Commonwealth Games. Now, I haven't got so much detail on this. I know what the session was, and I can tell you what the times were, because I know exactly you know, how that went. She did 2 sessions before she went there. She did a low-level session on the track at on the Tuesday before she travelled, which right. So on the Tuesday before she travelled, she did a low-level session on the track, but it was just purely turnover with some 400s at slower than race pace, but just to sort of get her legs turning over again. But on the Saturday, of the 2nd, and she flew out to Delhi on the 3rd, we probably took a huge risk, and I said to her, you know, we're going to have to run a session that is going to at least give us some confidence and, you know, show that there's going to be something coming out of, you know, out of this, that we can, you know, go to Delhi with the confidence. And we decided to do 800, and in a way, I played this very much by ear, because the idea was that originally she was going to do a time trial, but it was a little bit breezy, so I decided against the fact that she was going to run a 1,000 metre or 1,200 metre time trial. Johnny Hay was there to pace her, and just the 2 of them on the track at Sandhurst. We did it early in the day, and we decided that we'd run an 8 and then do some 4s, but we weren't totally specific at how many 4s we were going to do. We had a good idea what we were going to do, but the 800 was the key to it all. So I said to her, I want you to run an 800, but let's look at running it at 2.8. So I want you to run 64 even pace. Johnny took her through in about 63.5, and she proceeded to run 2.67 for that 800. And I know that for a fact, even though it's not there, because this session is indelibly printed in my mind. So she ran a 2.6. She had 6 minutes recovery, and then we did 2 sets of 2 by 400. And the idea was that she was going to try and run them all under 62, which was going to be way faster than 1,500 metre race pace. She ran them off a minute recovery with 6 minutes between the pair. She ran all 4 of them at 61, between 61.7 and 62.1. I then sent her away after the last one, and she had 8 minutes recovery, and she came back, and I said to her, look, I don't know if we should do it, but let's, you know, the session's going really well, but let's chuck this 4 in just as fast as you can go. She did the 4 and went and ran 57.6. Then she had a long recovery, and I came back and I said, just turn your legs over, run some 2s, and run them in around 28-29 off of 200 jog. She ran the first 2 in around 27, and then on the 3rd one, the legs started to fall off, and she landed up running around 28.9. That was it, bagged. I could have stopped that session at any point, and I would have stopped it at any point if it hadn't been going well. But this was a chance that I took to actually push her towards where she needed to be, what I thought she needed to be. It was a big risk, and I can assure you that those times are not rubbish. They were the correct times that she ran. I came out away from that track full of apprehension about her going, but thinking, God, she's in the shape of her life. Even though she'd had the break, she literally was. She'd never completed a session like that before. And in my view, you know, she could have run, of that day, if she'd have run a 1500, she would have definitely run under 4 minutes. There was no doubt about that. Even with the long recoveries, it doesn't matter, you're still creating that. Like, if she'd have been able to run at 64, 64, 64 and finish quick, but she was running way quicker than that and running, you know, really strongly and feeling very comfortable. And on a day when it was not windy, it was a little bit windy. So she went out she flew up here and had a nightmare journey. Unfortunately, I didn't agree with the travel arrangements, and Mike knows that, but that's as it was. She had a long wait at Glasgow Airport for the flight to Delhi, and when she actually got to Delhi, she was really, really very, very tired. And I was given a presentation up in Manchester, and she was ringing me from the airport in between me being on the presentation. And you know, we were talking about, you know, what she needed to go and do, trying to psych her up, and you know, how she was going to achieve these performances. But basically, we were looking at the fact that, you know, she was tired, and this was a risk that I'd taken, but it was a risk that, you know, I think, in my view, had to be taken. She actually only had a very short period of time, and I flew out on the Monday, arrived on the Tuesday, I think, and had the conversation with her, and all she did was just, and Mike knows, she didn't do a lot of running at all. She just did just some strides, very, very short runs, nothing serious at all. She went into the heat of the 1500 and qualified, but I thought, oh my God. I walked away from the stadium thinking, what were we going to do? Because it was just awful. She didn't look good. She had one of the you know, poor performance, but she qualified. And okay, she qualified easily, but she didn't look comfortable in doing it. So I knew then that yes, it was overcooked, but what we were going to do to turn it round. And Mike knows that, you know, I had a strong conversation with her, and I think one of the things that comes out of this was, it was the conversation originally when I said, if you're going to go, you're going to win a medal. And I'll be serious about this, and I actually spoke briefly to Laurie about it at lunchtime. Steph's decision to be Scottish wasn't one that was taken lightly. It wasn't one where she was pursued to do it. Yes, the idea of doing it was implanted in her mind, but she didn't do it because she wanted to take an easy option. She did it actually because she does have Scottish pride. And she went into this race with me telling her that this was going to be the championships, that she could actually win a championship medal, and that if she was going to go out there and do it, she needed to go out there and do it for everybody else, her mother, Scottish, and for myself and for herself, but to show that she was going to actually do this and run with pride and passion. This was going to be the first time she was going to run for Scotland. And you know, the conversation that we had was very emotional. I mean, Steph is an emotional person. You can see from my enthusiasm, I'm an emotional person when it comes to athletics. But this was something that we really had to talk up. And Steph went into that final. She was drawn in lane 1. And it would have been very easy for Steph to go to the back of the field being drawn in lane 1. But the conversation was, no, Steph. I knew that if she went to the back of the field, that would be it. Nothing would happen. I told her to go straight to the front of it, get on the front of it, hold the curve the whole way, and see what you could do. She lost the curve with about 390 metres to go, but she was still there when the Kenyans went. And she ran, in my view, the only race she could possibly have done. You know, she put herself in the right position, she put herself in the mix, and when it looked like she wasn't going to get a medal, she came strongly at the end and landed up winning that medal. And to me, it was a medal which, given everything, she probably should never have won. But she actually won it because she ran with real passion and real pride. And you know, I know that because she was physically wrecked. She then went around the 5,000 metres purely on a high, and she was entered. But in fact, she would have won that medal in the 5,000 if she'd have been fresh, and as she should have been, because the performance in Brussels was far superior to the one she produced there. And she actually already had a medal around her neck when she ran the race. And I think that she more or less, because she had that medal, with 400 metres to go, she let the 3 Kenyans go, and then she suddenly thought down the back straight, oh God, one of them's coming back. And she then thought, I'll try and chase. It was too late, and she did. She chased and almost caught her towards the end. But you know, it was gone. But I know if Steph had been as hungry for that medal as she was for the one in the 1500, I think she'd have got it as well. I had to rush that bit a little bit, but basically I think I've given you an insight into what we did do, and you know, it did mean a lot to Steph, and it also meant a lot to me, because you know, proudest moment in my life is Steph winning medals at major championships, and she's won 2. Well, she's won more than 2 at championships, but the 2 major ones that I consider, Commonwealth Games and the World Junior title. So, you know, that's it.
Can I just, I'll take a couple of questions and then we'll move on to the club side of it, and I think we do need to keep moving. Thanks very much, Mick. There's a lot in there, a lot of heartfelt stuff. But if you go back to where he said she was wrecked at the end of the heat, to where she actually ran the final, she spent most of that time eating or sleeping. She was lying in her bed. Actually, that's really all she did. Just truly did relax, recover to an extent that you think it can't be good for an athlete. But she knew exactly what she needed to do. Really key. Any key questions from this morning, or from what you've heard in the last 5 minutes? Gregor.
Can I ask about recovery? Earlier on you said jobs all by recoveries. Does that apply even when you're doing the more intense stuff, leading up to like the Barcelona, which is doing more intense stuff with the longer recoveries, you still jogging all our recoveries?
With the longer recovery, she would definitely have still kept moving. She might have walked initially with running a 2.6 800. She probably would have walked initially, but then she would have broken that into a jog. She wouldn't have stood around for 8 minutes. Something that I realise that I have to progress to do is to bring in longer recoveries within my coaching. Don't get me wrong when I say it's all about endurance, that short recovery, longer volume. I know that as an athlete develops down that pathway, you have to introduce different types of training. Now, for me, that's something that I've never coached an athlete who runs sub 4 minutes, and very few people have ever coached an athlete who runs sub 4 minutes. I know that the emphasis on Steph's training will change, and as she gets faster, she'll have to, or needs to get faster, she will have to stretch recoveries on that type of training. So, you know, I can say that probably in the run-up to 2012, hoping that everything is going to be good and she's recovering from this broken leg, that you know, there will be more, because we know that the aerobic ability will be there, because even though she's had a long period out now with this broken leg, you know, you can recover that aerobic capacity relatively quickly by getting in there and just doing that volume of training. What we will need to do, because she'll have no racing this year, will be to try and find a slight shortcut to get back to running fast, and therefore we will have to start doing probably a lot more faster reps, having done maybe a really good strong aerobic January, February, March, and then start to move to the speed endurance with a view that there'll be a lot more speed in the early part of the season in the run-up to 2012. And yes, longer recoveries. You know, I think for me, that was the change in the training in Monte Gordo this year from Monte Gordo the previous year, from in 2010 and Monte Gordo in 2009. Perhaps 2 short recoveries in the heat and maybe 2 longer sessions, and changing that and making it far more high-end anaerobic and longer recoveries and less reps was an experiment that worked, and it will be one that will be moved forward in the future. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Anybody else? Yes, please.
This morning, you mentioned the treadmill.
Yeah.
And I've been coaching for a long time and never did much work in the treadmill. But in Scotland, in the December past, I had Ross Matheson feeding, and we were worried because it was snow all the time. And 3 of my backers, the parents, bought 3 treadmills for 3 different athletes, and it worked well. And I wasn't too sure if that was a way to go, or to use a treadmill.
I would never turn around and say to Steph, transfer a lot of her running onto a treadmill. I think you have to put it on the treadmill because of bad weather conditions, and we had quite a lot of snow last year, and we ran obviously slow reps in the snow because that's all we could do. And there was a long period where we did that. But getting on the treadmill for Steph is purely that adaptation to altitude, that monitoring of her well-being. Charlotte Purdue runs a bit more on a treadmill because she quite likes running on a treadmill. So for her, she might run 3 times a week on a treadmill, and she quite enjoys it. I actually don't encourage athletes to continue to do that. I use it as a rehab way back by walking on a treadmill and running on a treadmill as part of the rehab process for athletes coming back from injury. But you know, like 5-minute walk, 5 minutes on the treadmill, 5-minute walk, 5 minutes on the treadmill, 5-minute walk as a rehab type session. I find that's good because the ground's uneven outside. Anybody with a foot injury, sometimes that's the right way to come back. But I wouldn't use treadmills personally unless there was a good reason why I was using it.
Those sessions, Dave, were all done in hypoxic conditions. They're all done in simulated.
His views are the same as mine anyway, because I'm not too sure, you know, whether we should encourage that.
No.
But one of the athletes seemed to like it, and he's running fine. But I'm like you, I think, no, I wouldn't.
I like being outdoors, so just
Yeah. Okay.
Last question before we move on. Yes, no.
Like this morning you talked about monitored runs.
Yep.
Can you just give us a bit more detail what you mean by a monitored run?
So even with an athlete going out and running not on a treadmill, one of the things that I do with all the athletes I coach is, for example, the weekly plan is that, okay, Amelia Greco runs a 40-minute run on a Monday, she runs a 40-minute run on a Wednesday, and maybe 20 minutes on Friday. So that's her runs, but she'll have a 40-minute course that she'll be doing. Now, one of the things that I look at is that she runs around that 40-minute course every week, say. Now, if she's running the same time around that 40-minute course in March as she was in September, then there's something wrong with winter training. So I actually think, you know, people say, oh, you shouldn't time runs, or you shouldn't coach people to run quick. But if you have a young developing athlete at 14, 15, 16, where they're at in September, they have to move forward because they're not going to progress as an athlete if they don't. So therefore, if they're not running faster in those runs by the time they get to March, then there's a problem. You haven't done your job and completed the winter training, because it's logical. If they're still running the same pace in March as they were in September, then what's happened? Nothing. They may have become more efficient, but they won't have actually got a lot faster. And the way that I can move lactate curves is by getting athletes that are on minimal mileage, like young athletes, to actually run their steady runs reasonably quick, but running them so as that they can monitor it, they know what pace they're running at. Some of them have Garmin's, some of them just run off a time. Because it's the same course they do, they know if they've run 30 seconds quicker than the week before, they know if they've run 30 seconds slower. And with the Wednesday runs that we do from Tesco's throughout the whole year, one is a winter run, one is a summer run. The winter run's on the road, the summer run's on the grass. But it's on a loop, the same loop, week in, week out. Everybody knows what they're running around there, so they can see a progression. And if someone's having a problem and they're running slower, and I've taken 2 minutes longer than I normally run around there, then the question is why? And that's my monitored run. And you know, Steph, we use that in what we say there, because I try to monitor every single run that the athletes do. I want that feedback from those runs. An easy run on a Sunday, yeah, go out and run whenever you want. If you're running for an hour, fine, go anywhere. Go on the canal, go up a big hill, whatever they're going to do. That's the freedom to go and run. And I have no problem with that. They just run at whatever pace, however they feel, wherever the recovery is on what's happened the day before.
Good. If it's okay with you, Mick, and it's okay with others, I think we'll maybe rattle off this last bit in terms of the way we chatted last night. I tell him to go to his bed at 12 o'clock, you know, because it's once he starts on his theme, it's quite difficult to get him stopped. But I asked Mick to talk about Aldershot Farming District because I think everyone knows that they've developed a niche as an endurance club. And everyone in here is really involved in endurance. But they've been around a long time. And when Mick and I were talking last night, we were saying that back in the 60s, very much a male-dominated club, or a balanced club in the 60s, probably a male-dominated club in the 90s, and then the changes coming through to where they are, to an extent that maybe at the moment people even regard it as a female club. So, some of the things that I was interested in is basically, what's your catchment area, Mick?
Right, Aldershot is probably a town of about, well, Farnborough, Aldershot's a town of about 50, 60,000 people. A lot of people think that there must be something in the water because we seem to have a lot of athletes that run well. going back to when I started coaching females, which was in 1993, I've been coaching males since about 1986, but in 93 I started coaching females. And the reason why I decided to do it was because our club had a structure which said there's a coach that coaches females, there's a coach that coaches males. But females weren't really going anywhere in 93. And the reason was there weren't many people coming into the club. And we found that the performance of our girls, they weren't even closing teams in the Southern Road Relay Championships. And the area itself is not a hugely, it's not a big conurbation, but it's obviously 40, 45 miles outside of London, but it's got a lot of towns very close. It's got Guildford, it's got a club, it's got Windsor not very far away, it's within 20 miles, it's got Woking, which is in about 15 miles, it's got Camberley, which is within 5 miles, it's got Fleet, which is within about 5 miles, and they've all got clubs, and they all coach young athletes. But obviously, because we've had quite a successful coaching structure, we do land up pulling in 1 or 2 athletes from those clubs. Now that's not something that I've actively gone out there to do, but other clubs have it happen with them as well. Like Windsor, for example, get a lot of athletes coming from around our area and going to Windsor even. But we have actually generated a few athletes into the club from a little bit further away, like Guildford, just the other side of Guildford, when they could go to Guildford. Now, I'm not saying that's because the coaching quality is not there, but when you have a strong nucleus of a group that has a strong structure of a pathway, that people see that happening, and when they look at it and see people that they're running around, in events, or should be running around, and their progression isn't happening, that they think, well, maybe I might go and try the training here. And unfortunately, it means that we do land up getting athletes joining us from other clubs. But that's not to say that we don't have our own strong nucleus of athletes that we get anyway. And when I first started coaching, we had a very big group start to build, because I was going into the schools and I was dragging kids into the club from schools. I was giving bits of paper out here, there and everywhere, and I started to really pull in loads of girls to the group. And I had boys, but I also then started to pull in boys. And at one stage, I could have as many as 100 kids on the track on a Tuesday night running, and that was something that was obviously then going to produce a challenge. For me, I was working for British Telecom at the time. I did my 9 to 5 job. Well, it was in fact 7:30 to 4 o'clock. But I did that job. But every single opportunity I could, I was trying to get to kids' races after schools, bring athletes in, and that's the way that I started to develop the group. I just got as many in as I could, and then from there, if I had a girl that was an under 15 running sub 5 minutes, I thought I had the bee's knees. That's where it stood at that moment in time. And I just look at it now and think, my God. And if I was giving girls at that age to train, I would give them 6 by 400 metres off of 3 minutes recovery. And I'd be worried that I was pushing them too hard. And, that would be the longer endurance session. And the speedier session might be 150s or 200s. And, to me, that was me starting to think, well, how am I going to push these girls forward? How am I actually going to develop it? I'd already developed boys to a reasonable level, because in 94, I had 4 guys that I coached win the English National Cross Country. And that was the first national that I actually put a girls team on the start line as well. And they were separate still. That was the last English national that was separate. But the men won, and the girls, I think, finished absolutely nowhere in the under 17 age group. And we may not have even closed the team. So I just went about trying to get as many people into the club as possible. So the catchment area, yes, it's a reasonable sized catchment area, but it has a lot of competition within that. And now we have even a lot more competition, because we have kids playing football, girls playing football, we're getting less and less coming in. So we're actually working with less athletes now than we were working with in the mid-90s and around 2000.
How do you split your training groups up?
How do I?
Split your training groups up.
Okay, so I've already spoken about the structure of what we do. So longer session on a Sunday, which could be big volume session, slightly over distance as well. So for example, senior men could be doing 12k on a Sunday, because they might have to run 12k. So why wouldn't you get them doing 12k? But within that, obviously we have senior men, but we also have under 13s. Now, it's a total mixed ability group, and Steph could actually be training with a good quality under 15 male athlete, and that is the way it has always been. Steph has used partners like that, but I've been very fortunate from the point of view that I've been able to structure it with groups by having senior athletes that are either in decline in their career and still want to run but want to continue to push that forward and prepared to take a running stroke, not coaching role, but certainly a leadership role within it, and are actually still active in doing it. And even at this moment in time, my youngest group, and I don't have a massive input into them, but they train within the group, because I've got a female athlete who probably is only running 45 minutes for 10k, but she's a perfect person to run with under 13 or beginning athletes that are just starting to come into that group. So I can structure groups with the ability of older athletes that maybe not running so quick, and young athletes that are developing and coming through. So within a session on a Sunday, or a session on a Tuesday, which again is a reasonable volume session, not quite as long as Sunday, but again on the grass, and I can have up to 10 groups running around a grass circuit, which I mark out. I mark out maybe a K loop, and within that K loop, you know, people will do maybe a tempo on the front end of it, followed by either K reps, 400 reps, 600 reps, but basically a block of training that adds up to 10k for senior men, 8k for junior men, 6k for under 17 women and under 17 boys, and that's the way it works. But you know, you could have someone that's doing an 8k session still training with someone that's doing a 6k session. But because I structure my sessions into, if you like, little sets, from the point of view that if I wanted to achieve a 10k volume worth of session, I would put something like 5 by 2k within that. So you could break that down into 2 by a k, 5 by 4, another 5 by 4, and you get your little 2k blocks. So, you know, if everything's done that way, then people can do part of that. Do you understand what I'm saying by that? And so therefore, I can have guys that start a session which is an 8k session, and I can have a female athlete that's only doing a 6k session, like Amelia Goreca, for example. She can train with a half decent male that's doing 8k, and she'll just drop off one of these blocks. And that's the way that I find that works really well, especially in the winter, because it's more generic in the winter. It's just a case of getting in there and doing a volume of training. It doesn't matter, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be anything that's jazzed up. It's just get in there, run a volume of training off of relatively short recoveries, and it doesn't have to be fast, because if you're running on grass, you're not going to get so much response as you would if you're on the track. So you're actually building strength as well as not, thinking that you're running fast. And people that stay on the track throughout the winter within our club, they don't necessarily run any quicker when it comes to the summer. My athletes might take a little bit longer to transition to speed in the summer, but then they normally run longer when the track season is going on towards the end. And historically, all my athletes run very well in August and September. And I always target major championships, which are generally in August. And that's the fact that I sit down with athletes right at the start of the season, and wherever the major championship for that athlete is, be it the English schools, be it the World Youth or the European Junior, there's a pathway that says you will run well on that day. And that's how it will work. But, that transitioning from cross-country onto the speed endurance element, where you're starting on the track, into that faster top end speed stuff, is specifically planned. But the generic bit in the winter, which is just whack everybody in there doing a bigger volume of training, it doesn't matter. It's just get on and do it. And it doesn't have to be quick. Now, Steph would be running Ks at some point in the winter, early winter, in maybe 3:10 on the grass, but by midwinter, when it's really, really muddy on the grass, she might be running in 3:20, 3:25. It doesn't mean to say that's a bad thing. She's getting more physical strength from doing it. And I find that the minimising of risk of injury. And I'm fortunate that where we train on a fairly big field that I can get a loop, which has lights from a rugby field around, that we can actually shine, not lights particularly on the course, but the light is good enough to shine onto the loop we use. So it's relatively safe because I walk it with a risk assessment and make certain that there's nothing that people are going to get hurt on, no potholes, no anything. And this is good flat grass, it's playing field grass, it's football pitches, rugby pitches and everything like that.
Mick, what's your endurance pathway for the club?
What's the
Endurance pathway for the club? It's an endurance club, mainly.
Yep.
I know it's good in track and field, but, all aspects, but it's very much an endurance club. What do you regard as the endurance pathway from a kid coming in at the bottom to be a senior?
It's difficult to sum that up in one real, because...
You never used one sentence yet, so...
Right. I think when an athlete comes into the club, they're not certain what they really want to do. There is no, they may come down and they've had a little bit of success at school, but they're not necessarily somebody that thinks that they could actually be a good athlete, and they don't know that they're going to be maybe potentially the best 5,000 metre runner in Scotland. And for Steph, when she came down the club, it was a case of that there were other girls that were a lot better than Steph. And if you look at the pathway that she's taken, as an under 13, she was ranked way down in the 1500 metre range. I think she ran 5:20 something as an under 13 bottom year. Emma Pallant, who would be her big rival as such within that age group, as an under 13 top of the national rankings, ran quicker than Emily Pigeon because she did it in May at Millfield. Steph, as a second year, I don't think as a top year under 13, didn't break 5 minutes. So I think that pathway of people coming into the club is very much one where they don't necessarily come to me, obviously, to start with, unless I see an athlete from some source that I go somewhere and think, oh God, that kid looks good, and you can directly bring them into the group. The club has a structure which is like any club has a beginners group that starts, and we tend to find anybody that comes along in the winter tends to have more tendency towards running endurance anyway. But there is a beginners group which I don't see. I don't see at all. But within that, I have people that help me within the group. In particular, there's a woman called Kate Haynes, who's our cross-country team manager, but she's the link between the two groups. So what actually happens is she'll look down into that group and possibly go to some of the smaller under 11 leagues or under 13 leagues that are on, and she'll see if there's any decent athletes that are there, and then it'll be not pinched away from that coach, because that coach within that bottom tier knows that they are only developing that athlete for those athletes to go either into a sprint group or they go into an endurance group. But it's generally accepted that the athletes come out of that group and go elsewhere. The people taking that group are just purely taking it in as a fresh intake of athletes. So the progression into a stronger group is one that is natural at that level. I'm quite lucky because there is only one other endurance coach within the club at any level that can impact upon other athletes going with that, and he actually coaches a lot of older athletes and tends to do more longer endurance on the road. But because I have a very strong young athlete group, any under 13 that jumps up is going to come pathway towards me, and I'm someone that has always been quite good at looking at under 13s when I get them. And I said to Mike last night that we have successfully produced teams to win national medals for quite a while now, and we were producing boys to get medals going back into the late 80s and early 90s, but it took us a while to produce females to get those performances. And even now, I can have an intake of under 13 females that in September aren't particularly good, but by the time we get to March or February, they've got a lot better because of the endurance pathway that we take. And this year, they never won a medal until they got to the national. And the only medal they won all year was in the national cross country, and they managed to get third in the national cross country. But they lost everything else. They didn't get a medal at all, not even in the Southern Championships did they get a medal. So that was like a bit of a project in itself to actually try and achieve a medal within those under 13 girls age group. But as Mike said earlier, there's been a slight reverse, because our under 13 boys were absolute rubbish and are a long way back, and they didn't finish anywhere in the national cross country. But from that under 13, age group, when they come into that under 13 age group, and that pathway is me just developing that endurance, ethos, and you know, just building a good aerobic athlete. If an athlete, because sometimes athletes within my group actually, because they're quite fit, they also, when they go to league matches, they can land up doing sprints, and quite often, because we haven't got a lot of sprinters, and they can land up progressing into sort of 200-400 metres, and quite a lot of them are quite good, and I have to let those athletes go because I can't hold on to those. But because they're generally fit, quite often they beat the sprinters who aren't fit enough, because, you know, at that age it takes quite a bit to run 200. You know, you have to have a certain element of endurance to be able to run 200, even at the age of 13. And the athletes that I coach, I have athletes that can win medals at county championships at 200 and 800 at 13. Steph couldn't, but I have some that can. But, you know, they may not make 800 metre runners in the long term. They may make better 200, 400 metre runners. And in that instance, they might do their winter work with me for a while at a young age, but then when they get to 15, 16, they're certainly transitioning, 14, 15, they're certainly transitioning to other events. But the ones that stay within that group are definitely those that are on a longer endurance pathway. And as I already said earlier with Steph, it's a case of that, this is a girl that everybody thinks is a plodder, but she ran 800 metres last year and ran 2.2, and she did that off in the early season when she still hadn't done any speed work. I know she'd have run 2.1 at least last year if we'd have done it in August, and I don't call that plodding. And yet, when we started her, she got her success from winning the national cross country as an under 15 and being a very renowned cross country runner, not a track runner. And all of a sudden, at the age of 17, she goes to Rieti and runs an Olympic qualifying time in 2007. And much to everybody's surprise, where the hell did she get that from? But Steph and I knew she was going to run an Olympic qualifying time because I know my athlete, I know exactly what she was capable of. And her performance manager within UK Athletics at the time was a guy called Matt Faber, and he actually said to me, "What the hell are you playing at? Why are you sending her to Rieti to run she should be back bagging her season." I said, "She's going to go and run the Olympic qualifying time." And he laughed at me. "She really thinks she can do that?" I said, "Yes." And she went and she ran an Olympic qualifying time, and that held her in good stead because it took her to the Olympics in 2008. And that's because she's had this good endurance pathway. And it's not just Steph, it's the others as well. Amelia Goreca, they're all working down that endurance pathway.
Can I just take you on that route just now then? Because if we go back to 93, when you first started to get success with youngsters, we talked about this last night, you had some very successful under 13s. But as we said, they're not in the sport. They didn't last or take long in the sport. But the group from 03 and subsequent are staying in the sport. What's the difference between Mick Woods and Aldershot now and Mick Woods and Aldershot in 93?
Well, some of those have been shown in some of those slides because it's Mick Woods' philosophies have slightly changed. I've always had a good, strong endurance ethos, but I think that as a coach, I think I've changed from being a club coach, which is what I was in around 2003, to, I hope, a world-class coach. And that was a pathway that happened to me because I became employed by UK Athletics. I was very lucky to be able to do that. I'm no longer employed by UK Athletics, but what I learned in the period of time that I was has really enabled me to put in place stuff at Aldershot that I would never have put in place otherwise. I have a far greater understanding of the requirements of athletes when they're injured, from the point of view that yes, athletes still get injured and I can't stop that, but I'm able to deal with the fact that if an athlete does get an injury, I can automatically highlight what that issue or problem could be. I probably pay more attention now than ever I did before to athletes being injured because maybe, and I'm not being complacent by saying, oh yeah, there was a lot of athletes there and you know, you could actually knew that you were always going to have a good strong group of athletes, but it was a case of that maybe I had less time to do what I really wanted to do, and maybe I lacked the knowledge, but my knowledge has developed greatly through being able to sit and talk to physiologists, to talk to medical people, and I find a far greater understanding of when someone comes up to me and say they've got a problem with their knee around or the outside of the knee, I can go, well, you might have tight IT bands, so yeah, we need to go and do some IT band stretching, whereas in pre-2003, I probably had less of an idea as to what that might well have been. So I think I can actually, identify more issues and problems. But I've also been able to put in place probably a far better coaching ethos as well, from the point of view that I learned a lot from working alongside Alan Story, and I think Alan Story is someone with a really good endurance. His feel on longer endurance is something that I share that philosophy now. I shared it anyway, but I also know how to manage it a lot better, I think, than before, because Alan is someone that used to push athletes. I've seen him push Mo Farah, and Mo's gone to the point of almost breaking and coming back and then running really well. And despite what's going on now in America with Mo, you don't just turn an athlete around in 6 months to produce that performance that he did. And despite what's going on out there, Mo Farah was a very good athlete before he ran 27, what was it, 40, whatever it was. So you're not going to turn that around in 6 months. Mo is always going to be capable of achieving those performances. But working alongside the likes of Alan and Mark Rowland, Mark Rowland had been to Olympic Games, Alan had coached athletes to Olympic Games, was something that enabled me to develop the confidence and the ability to have much greater understanding of what I needed to do to push an athlete to that level. Now I've been able to bring that down to within a club level. So someone like Amelia Greca now is on a performance pathway. She's run 15:50 this year for 5,000 already, and she's still a bottom year junior athlete. So potentially, she's going to run quicker than Steph, quicker than Emily Pidgeon, quicker than Sian Edwards, and probably move to Charlotte Purdue, who's second on the all-time list behind Zola Budd. So, and if you look at the Power 10, you'll see that a lot of athletes that I coach figure very prominently in the all-time list for 5,000 metres, because I have a strong view that athletes should run 5,000 metres. This is a conversation I had with Laurie earlier, and I don't think that I think that to encourage those athletes to do that will breed success, creates role models within a club, and if you have good role models, then other people are going to look up to that, aspire to want to be that way, and I find that that's what's happening now. People are staying into sport because of it. Steph had role models, but the role models she was looking up to weren't at the level that Steph has achieved, whereas role models that Charlie Purdue's looking up to, the role models that Amelia Greca's looking up to, and the girls beneath that now have obviously achieved at a far higher level, and that's the significant thing about it. But I didn't only coach females, because in 2004 Chris Thompson achieved the Olympic B standard for Athens. Didn't go to Athens because they took John Mayock, who also only achieved the Olympic B standard. Chris was the younger and possibly the better bet for it, but he didn't get to go. So I actually coached Chris up until around 2007, and it took him till 2010 to actually run faster than he did in 2004. So Chris, I coached from the age of 10 as well, so I was able to develop Chris into a pretty good athlete in 2004 when he was still only about 23 years old. Chris actually won the European under-23 championship and 5,000, and actually beat Mo in what was a legendary last lap sprint finish where he pulled about 40 metres out of Mo on the last lap. And again, Chris was someone that did that from that endurance pathway. So yes, I've had a good success with females, but Johnny Hay is now an athlete that's running very well. He's run under 14 minutes this year for 5,000 as a junior athlete, and so there are role models for some of those younger athletes that are looking up to people like Johnny Hay. And Johnny's incentive is to run quicker than Chris, which he's now done. He's run quicker than Chris at 1,500 and quicker than Chris at 5,000 as a junior. So, and next person on Johnny's target as a junior is actually Mo's time, which is like literally a second ahead. So, if he gets that, then, he's into the top 10, I think. So, but yeah.
One more question from me, Mick. One of the other things we talked about last night, and you and I have talked about this before, is how do you retain athletes? Because we were talking about identifying the ages at which we lose girls and boys, which we agree is different. So how do Aldershot, how do you go about retaining athletes?
Right. Well, what's actually happened, I've seen the trend that female athletes can be very good at a young age because females tend to have a lot more good natural ability, natural endurance as well, and they often achieve good performances younger. But the problems for females are that there's a lot more pressure comes on them at around the age of 16, 17. And I find that's a huge area where they start to go out of the sport. 16, 17, other interests, which boys, you know, they don't necessarily cope with the peer pressure that they get from friends at school, because running for a female doesn't appear to be comfortable when you're going out there and physically pushing your body to run hard. And of course there's a change in female body shape which also impacts upon an athlete, because, you know, I spoke earlier about young athletes with high VO2s, and, you know, VO2 isn't a total indicator of performance, because, you know, athletes with lower VO2s can actually achieve at world-class level because they go out there and they train hard anyway. So that's only a rough guideline, so I'm not going to, you know, get fixated with high VO2s. But, you know, when an athlete's body shape changes, there is an impact upon their aerobic capacity, and that's inevitably happens. And I find that a lot of athletes, female athletes, struggle to cope with the change, but, you know, also struggle to cope with the fact that their performances are not as good. And then this is where sometimes within the group at Aldershot, they start to see, you know, a good under 15 girl running faster and coming past, that is an indicator maybe, oh God, you know, they don't necessarily like that, and you have to deal with that and see how you can bring an athlete through it. And I've started to be, you know, reasonably successful within managing to do that, because, you know, I think winning, it's all very good creating a, my ambition has always been for to win the national cross-country title at senior level, and for women, and we've been twice, I think, now. We were second in Leeds, and that's something that I want to try and do, to produce an Aldershot team to win the senior national. I've produced teams in every single other age group to do it, but I haven't done it at senior women yet. And it's quite, you know, significant that, you know, trying to bring those teams through is very, very difficult. And if I can do that, then, you know, I feel that, you know, that's going to encourage more and more of those girls to stay in the sport. And, you know, that's a target, because we've been successful at National Road Relay. We've won National Road Relay titles because we can use our juniors in the National Road Relays, and we've always been very strong again. But there's also this little bit of a watershed that happens when people go to university, and this is where I find a number of female athletes again drop out of the sport, because they have other interests when they go to university. They don't have the commitment to do it. And I can speak from first-hand experience, because my daughter was a reasonable endurance athlete, made the decision to go to Staffordshire University, who at the time had a good female team. They actually finished second in the Bucks Champs. She ran for the first 18 months of her degree, gave it up because she met a guy who then became the more important thing in her life, and decided that running wasn't what she wanted to do. Big pity, but that is exactly what happens. She didn't totally find the drink route, although she did go down that route a little bit, but that wasn't the thing that totally steered away. It was the guy that actually steered her away from it. Boys tend to stay in the sport far more when they go to university, and I actually have been able to keep, recently I've been able to keep more who go away to other universities to actually do my training, because my reputation as a coach, as it improves, you know, some people actually, if an athlete that I coach goes to university, other people maybe want to train with him. And so Chris Thompson, when he was at Loughborough, had a number of training partners that actually wanted to do the training sessions that he was doing. And in the end, I landed up coaching a couple of guys at Loughborough, a guy called Dave Mitchinson, Ollie Laws. These were athletes that I coached in the period that Chris was at Loughborough. So, you know, for me, it wasn't as easy with females. I had females that went to Loughborough and they landed up going to other coaches, because I wasn't able to maintain those links in communication, or, you know, the motivation for those girls to go out and run. So the guys, in my view now, where the watershed there is when they leave university and they have to go and get a job, and the alternative is to go to America to do post-grad and extend their running career, and then when they come back from America they go out of the sport because they have to go and then get a job. Unfortunately, you know, gone are the days when people actually had a 9-to-5 job and got out there and run. And there's a lot to be said for Al Tupper, really, isn't there? So, you know, I actually think that if we maybe had a bit more stronger ethos that said, yeah, I can be an athlete and run. And there are, you know, in the 70s, this country produced very many good endurance athletes that had full-time jobs. Bernie Ford had a full-time job. And I know that there is an attitude amongst male athletes that they only want to run if they don't have to do anything else. And that's why they go to America to extend their running careers, and eventually when they come back to America they don't run anyway. And that's a challenge that we have to try and do. And one of the things that I think, we can keep athletes in this country running well and progressing in that endurance pathway. I think it's the right way to go. And I'm not pointing any fingers at Chris having gone to America and people like Derek having stayed in this country and training here now. And people may well go to America. And I'm not saying that it's not a move that might not work for people, because there's some great results coming out at the moment from people like Tom Fowle and Chris running very, very well. And that may well be the right move for those guys, but what really wants to happen is those guys need to come back here and actually then come back and produce those performances.
We've got a group of guys at the back here waiting and desperate to do a session with you in Aldershot. Okay. So we've got time for maybe 5-minute questions. Okay. Probably round the club teams that we've been talking about rather than the performance aspect. Laurie?
Mick, how do you manage so many athletes? How do you manage to control that mass of numbers?
Right, well, if someone looks on the Power 10, they think, God, how does Mick Woods coach all those athletes? And I do have contact with all those athletes in one form or another, but because of the structure that exists within Aldershot with a number of people that help me, it's not just me that is here. I might be the figurehead with it all, and I may be the person that sets most of the training, but there are a lot of other people that actually support that in the form of athletes and other people that watch and monitor some of the training that goes on. But they still come back to me and view me as coach. And from my point of view, it's a very difficult job because it's a 24/7 job. I have to manage the amount of time I give to certain athletes, and I make no bones about it. If I step well, I will do all the work I need to do to put into step. But Steph as an athlete knows that there are other athletes within the group, because when she was in the under 15 age group, Chris Thompson was running pretty well at the time, and my efforts were focused on Chris Thompson. But if I'd have left all my efforts totally on Chris Thompson, I would land up not having a Steph 12, because Chris Thompson decided he was going to change his coaching relationship and move on, and that's down to Chris. For me, I still need that challenge, and I'm not saying that Steph's going to go and find someone else to be coached by, but say Steph did decide that she was going to move on, and I still want to coach. I actually want to be able to have, if you like, a legacy of athletes continuing to come through. So the level of support that I might give to an under 13 girl will be more of, they might well have me down as their coach on the Power 10, but mine will be a lot more of a mentoring type role than just a supportive type role, rather than setting a structured training program. But as the athlete develops over a period of time, then I have to take on more responsibility for that athlete's progression. So someone like Amina Gareka, who's now moving strongly forward, 15th in the world cross country as a junior, and another 2 years to go, she's someone that I have to give a lot of attention to, because she's on a very good performance pathway, and I'd be silly if I didn't. So I have to actually manage, if you like, tiers of athletes in a structure that says, that's what, but this is what this tier get, and this next tier get this, and so on. But everybody that turns up to training on a Tuesday or a Thursday or a Sunday will have access to me, and will have a word and a contact from me, and it'll either be, that was a good session, or was there a problem tonight, didn't go so well, but there's support within that. And people will go, they'll see kids queuing up to speak to me on a Tuesday night, and they won't leave the car park after training until they've spoken to me. And that's not because I'm telling them to do it, it's because that's what they want to do. And they see other people getting this input, they want that input as well. So if it's the under 13 kids, they're finished a little bit earlier, I'm still in the car park, I'll be having a conversation with them, and then they're off, and then the under 15s and the others are coming in, but I always prioritise the younger ones first, because they're the ones that have got to go home to bed earlier.